It was one of those afternoons that felt slow and heavy. The sun hung lazily in the sky and the streets shimmered with heat. People rushed past holding cold drinks or hiding under umbrellas, each person caught up in their own little world. Among them was a man in his early 30s walking briskly out of his office building, clutching a brown paper bag that held his lunch. He wasn't in a hurry, but he wasn't relaxed either. His days followed the same pattern. Wake up early, drive through traffic, work long hours, eat alone, and then go back home to repeat it all the next day. His life wasn't bad, but it wasn't exciting either. It was just routine, predictable, safe. That day he decided to eat outside instead of the small cafeteria at work. He needed some air. The office walls felt too tight, the constant clicking of keyboards too loud, so he walked down the street to a nearby park. It wasn't big or fancy. Just a few benches, some trees, and a little fountain that made a soft trickling sound. It was enough for a bit of peace. He found a bench in the shade and sat down. The park wasn't crowded, just a few people around. A couple of children chased pigeons near the fountain, their laughter cutting through the stillness. An old man sat on another bench feeding crumbs to the birds. The sight brought a small smile to his face. For a moment, he forgot about work and deadlines. He opened his lunch, simple food, nothing special. A sandwich, an apple, and a small box of salad. He'd made it himself the night before, trying to save money instead of eating out every day. As he took the first bite, something caught his attention. Across the path, sitting near a tree, was a young boy. Maybe around 10 or 11 years old. His clothes were worn out, his hair messy, and his shoes looked too big for his feet. But what stood out most was the way he was looking at the food, not in a rude or obvious way, but with quiet longing. His eyes followed each movement as the man lifted the sandwich to his mouth. The man paused mid-bite. He pretended not to notice at first, unsure what to do. Maybe the boy was just resting. Maybe he wasn't even hungry. Still, something in the boy's face, something tired yet innocent, made it hard to ignore. Minutes passed. The boy kept glancing at the food, then quickly looking away whenever their eyes met. The man tried to focus on his lunch, but he couldn't. He thought about the leftovers in his fridge, the snacks in his office drawer, and the coffee he bought every morning without thinking twice. The thought of this kid sitting there hungry started to bother him. Finally, he sighed and called out softly, "Hey, you want some lunch?" The boy froze. For a second, he looked unsure if the man was talking to him. Then he slowly stood up and walked closer, his steps cautious. His eyes darted between the man's face and the sandwich still in his hand. "You can have it," the man said, smiling gently. "I'm not that hungry anyway." The boy hesitated. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice small but polite. "Yeah, go ahead," the man replied. The boy's face brightened instantly. He sat beside the man but left a respectful distance, like he didn't want to bother him. He opened the sandwich carefully as if it were something precious. Then he started eating, slowly at first, then faster as hunger took over. The man watched quietly, feeling something warm stir inside him. It wasn't pity, it was something deeper. A reminder of how easy it was to forget that others struggled in ways he never had to. When the boy finished, he looked up shyly. "Thank you," he said. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." The man's chest tightened. "Since yesterday?" he repeated, his voice soft. The boy nodded. "My dad's looking for work. We used to have food every day, but lately, it's hard." He didn't look sad when he said it, just honest, like it was a simple fact of life. The man didn't know what to say. He looked down at his lunch bag, now empty except for the apple. He handed it over. "Here, take this too." The boy hesitated but then took it with a grateful smile. "You're really kind," he said quietly. "My mom used to say people who share food have good hearts." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. He thought about his own mother, who used to say similar things when he was little. She'd always taught him to share, to be kind even when it wasn't easy. Somewhere along the way, between growing up and chasing responsibilities, he'd forgotten that. They sat together in silence for a few minutes. The boy finished the apple and wiped his hands on his shirt. "I should go now," he said, standing up. "My dad might be waiting." The man nodded. "Take care, okay?" The boy smiled and waved before walking off toward the edge of the park. The man watched until he disappeared from sight. Something about the encounter stayed with him. He looked down at his now empty lunch bag and felt different. He couldn't quite explain it. It wasn't sadness or guilt. It was more like clarity. He thought about how small that moment was, yet how powerful it felt. A simple meal, a small act, but to that boy it meant something real. And to him it reminded him that kindness didn't need to be grand or planned. Sometimes it was as simple as sharing what you had. He leaned back on the bench, letting the soft breeze brush against his face. The sounds of the park returned, the laughter of children, the cooing of pigeons, the splash of the fountain. Everything felt a little more alive, a little more meaningful than before. When he finally stood to leave, he noticed a few crumbs left on the bench. He brushed them away and smiled to himself. It had been an ordinary day, but it didn't feel ordinary anymore. Something about it had shifted his mood completely. As he walked back toward his office, he passed by a small bakery. He stopped for a moment, looked at the pastries in the window, and decided to buy two. Not for himself, but just in case he met someone else who might need one. He didn't know if he would, but it felt right to be ready. That night, as he lay in bed, he kept thinking about the boy's words. People who share food have good hearts. It echoed softly in his mind. He smiled, realizing that in helping someone else, he'd helped himself too, without even trying. The next morning, when he packed his lunch, he added an extra sandwich. He didn't plan on who it would go to, but he knew he wanted to keep that feeling alive. It wasn't about charity or duty. It was about connection, about remembering that kindness was free and powerful. That small encounter with a hungry boy had unknowingly planted a seed in his heart, one that would grow stronger each day. He didn't know it yet, but this simple act would soon lead to a change far bigger than he could imagine. And as he left his house the next day, holding that brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. The next morning started just like any other. The alarm buzzed at 6. The sky outside was still gray, and the man rubbed his eyes, feeling the same mix of sleepiness and routine boredom. But there was one small difference that made this morning a little unusual. On his kitchen counter sat a lunch bag, not with 1 sandwich, but 2. He smiled quietly to himself when he saw it. He didn't know who the second one was for, but it felt right to make it anyway. As he got ready for work, he found himself thinking about the boy from the park. He wondered if the kid had eaten breakfast, if his father had found work, if they were doing all right. There was no reason for him to care so much, but he did. The memory of those tired but grateful eyes had stayed with him all night. The office was as noisy and busy as usual. Phones rang, printers hummed, and people moved around in their usual morning rush. But today the man wasn't as distracted or tense as he normally was. There was something peaceful about him, a quiet kind of calm that others started to notice. His coworker even asked half-jokingly, "You win the lottery or something? You look too relaxed for a Monday." He just laughed and said, "No, just had a good day yesterday." During lunch break, instead of joining the group in the cafeteria, he took his bag and walked to the same park as before. The sun was softer today, and a light breeze made the trees sway gently. He sat on the same bench, hoping, though he didn't want to admit it, that he might see the boy again. Minutes passed. The fountain gurgled quietly in the background, and children's laughter echoed nearby. But the boy didn't come. He opened his first sandwich and began to eat, glancing around every so often. Maybe the kid had moved somewhere else. Maybe he wouldn't see him again. Still, the second sandwich stayed untouched beside him just in case. As he was finishing his meal, he noticed movement near the trees. It was the same boy walking slowly with a plastic bag in his hand. The moment their eyes met, the boy's face lit up with surprise and joy. He ran over, almost tripping on the grass. "You're here again," the boy said happily. The man smiled. "And so are you." The boy sat down beside him, this time without hesitation. "I was hoping I'd see you again," he said. "I told my dad about you." "Oh yeah? What did he say?" "He said you must be a good man. He told me to thank you again." The man felt a warm tug at his heart. "Tell him he raised a polite son," he said kindly. The boy laughed a little and looked at the food in his hands. "I brought this," he said, showing the plastic bag. Inside was a small bread roll and half an orange. "My dad got a little work this morning, so he bought this. I wanted to share it with you." The man stared at the simple offering, his throat tightening. He didn't expect anything in return, and yet, here was this small boy giving back the only thing he had. It wasn't the food itself, it was the thought behind it. The kindness. The effort. "That's very kind of you," he said softly. "Thank you." The boy beamed, happy to see the man take a bite. For a few minutes, they ate together in silence, watching the birds flutter around the park. Then the boy spoke again, more quietly this time. "My dad said it's been hard to find steady work," he said. "He used to fix cars, but the garage closed. Now he just takes whatever jobs he can find. Some days we don't have much, but he says we'll be fine." The man listened carefully. There was no complaint in the boy's voice, only quiet hope. It humbled him. Here was a child who had every reason to be sad, yet he spoke with such trust in the future. It made the man reflect on his own life. How often he complained about little things like deadlines or traffic. The boy's strength made him feel both small and inspired. When lunch was over, the boy said he had to go. "My dad's waiting at the bus stop. He found another short job for the afternoon." The man nodded. "I'll see you around?" "I come here most days," the boy said with a grin. "If I don't, it's because we're busy." "Then I'll keep an eye out for you." The boy waved and ran off again. The man watched him disappear, feeling that same warmth spread through him as yesterday. But this time it was mixed with something else, motivation. He wanted to do more than just share food. He wanted to help in a way that lasted. That night he couldn't stop thinking. As he cooked dinner, he wondered how many others like that boy were out there, going hungry while people like him threw food away without a second thought. It wasn't guilt that filled him, but realization. The world was full of small chances to be kind, and most people walked right past them. Before sleeping, he searched online for local shelters and food drives. He didn't know what exactly he was looking for, but he bookmarked a few. Maybe he could volunteer. Maybe he could start something small himself. The idea lingered in his mind. Days passed, and he continued his quiet routine. Every lunch break, he went to the park, always carrying an extra sandwich. Sometimes the boy came, sometimes he didn't. On the days he didn't, the man found someone else to give it to. A street cleaner, an old woman feeding pigeons, a teenager sitting alone. Every time the reaction was different, but the feeling was the same. That quiet peace, that small sense of connection, it stayed. One afternoon, he finally met the boy's father. The man was tall, thin, and had kind eyes that carried the weight of worry. He was fixing a broken cart near the park when the boy ran up and called, "Dad, this is him, the man I told you about." The father looked up and smiled warmly. "You must be the kind stranger my son can't stop talking about," he said. "I'm really thankful for what you've done for him." The man shook his head modestly. "It was nothing. He's a good kid. He actually shared his food with me the other day." The father chuckled softly. "That sounds like him. Even when we have little, he wants to share. He's got his mother's heart." The mention of the boy's mother made the man pause, sensing the story behind it. The father didn't say much more, but his eyes softened and the silence said enough. He understood. They talked for a while. The father told him about his old job at the garage, how it shut down, how he'd been trying to rebuild from scratch. "It's tough," he admitted, "but I'm not giving up. My boy's watching. I have to keep trying." The man admired his spirit. He wanted to help somehow, but he didn't want to embarrass him. So he simply said, "If you ever need help finding something, maybe I can ask around. I know a few people who might be hiring." The father's eyes widened slightly with hope. "You'd do that?" "Of course," the man said. "Everyone deserves a chance." They exchanged phone numbers before parting ways. That night, the man actually did ask around, talked to a friend who owned a small workshop. Within a few days, he helped arrange an interview for the boy's father. It wasn't a big job, but it was steady, enough to make a difference. A week later, the boy came running to the park, excitement glowing on his face. "My dad got the job," he shouted, nearly tripping over his shoelaces. "He said to thank you again." The man smiled so wide it almost hurt. "That's amazing," he said. "He earned it. He just needed a little help." The boy nodded eagerly. "Now we can buy proper food again. And I can go back to school soon." For a moment, the man couldn't speak. He felt something inside him shift completely. That simple act of giving lunch had started a chain of good things he never expected. He realized how much difference one small choice could make. When he walked home that evening, everything around him looked brighter. The same streets, the same traffic, but somehow full of meaning. He no longer saw the world as just a place to survive in, but as a place to care for. That night, he sat on his couch with a quiet smile, thinking about the boy, his father, and how life had connected them by chance. Or maybe not by chance at all. Maybe some moments were meant to happen, to remind people what really matters. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, But one thing was sure. He would never again underestimate the power of kindness, or the beauty of sharing something as simple as lunch. Weeks passed, and the man continued his routine of walking to the park during lunch. But now it wasn't just a habit, it had become something he looked forward to. The park, once a quiet place he visited to escape his office, now felt alive with purpose. He carried a lunch bag each day, always with an extra sandwich or snack, and every day he found someone who could use it. Sometimes it was the boy, sometimes someone else. Each time the smiles, the quiet gratitude, or even the simple polite thanks filled him in a way money or success never had. One afternoon, the boy ran toward him, waving energetically. "Come with me," he said, tugging at the man's hand. Curious and amused, the man followed him to a nearby bench where the boy's father was sitting. The father had a small tool bag beside him, his hands rough and stained from work, but he smiled warmly at the sight of the man. "My dad got another shift at the workshop," the boy exclaimed. "He's working mornings now so he can spend afternoons helping me with school stuff. He said to thank you again." The man's heart swelled. He felt proud of them, not because he had done something big, but because he had been part of a small chain of hope and support. The father nodded gratefully, shaking the man's hand. "I can't tell you how much this means. Things have been hard, but knowing someone cares, it gives you strength." The boy sat next to him, holding a small notebook. "I brought my homework. Can you help me with it?" Surprised but pleased, the man agreed. They opened the notebook together, and for the next hour they worked through math problems and reading exercises. The boy was bright, curious, and surprisingly patient. Every now and then he would glance up with a grin, showing how proud he felt when he got an answer right. It wasn't just learning. It was sharing time, care, and attention. Through these afternoons, the man learned more than just homework help. He learned about resilience, patience, and the quiet strength of people living in tough situations. The boy's father often joined them after work, sharing stories about his childhood, his struggles to find stable work, and his dreams for his son. Each story carried lessons the man had never fully appreciated before, about perseverance, humility, and finding joy in small victories. One day, the boy asked a question that surprised him. "Why do you do this for us, for me?" The man paused, thinking carefully. "Because it's right. Because everyone deserves a little kindness, and because helping you makes me feel happier than I ever expected." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "I think my mom would have liked you. She always said that even small acts of kindness could change someone's day, maybe even their life." The man felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't known the boy's mother, but he understood the weight of her words. He realized that the simple act of giving lunch had opened a door to something much bigger. It wasn't about food anymore. It was about connection, hope, and the impact small gestures could have on someone's life. Time went on, and the man began noticing changes in himself. He was more patient at work, more considerate with people, and more aware of the struggles others faced. He started carrying extra snacks not just for the park, but also for coworkers, neighbors, and strangers he met on the street. The habit spread quietly, naturally. It wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about the satisfaction of giving. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, the boy's father shared something that stayed with the man. "You know, it's not just the food. It's the attention, the kindness. My son needed someone to show him that the world isn't only hard and unfair. You did that." The man smiled, realizing the truth of it. Sometimes people need more than material help. They need to be seen, acknowledged, and reminded that someone cares. That understanding shifted the way he looked at every interaction in his life. It wasn't just about solving problems or fixing issues. It was about being present, offering a listening ear, and sharing even a little of what he had. The boy began bringing small things too: a flower from the park, a hand-drawn card, even a piece of bread he managed to get at home. The man accepted each gift with warmth, but he always reminded the boy that kindness wasn't about giving things back. It was about the gesture itself. Yet he cherished the thoughtfulness behind every offering. It showed him that gratitude, like kindness, could be expressed in countless ways. The father also started making an effort to improve their situation. He joined more shifts at the workshop, learned new skills, and even began volunteering on weekends to help others. It was inspiring to see the man's simple act of sharing a lunch ripple through the lives of this family, changing habits, attitudes, and futures. The man often thought about how a single moment, deciding to offer food, had led to such meaningful change. One evening, while the sun was setting and the park glowed in warm shades of orange, the boy asked quietly, "Do you think one person can really make a difference?" The man looked at him, thinking about the past weeks, the father's steady work, the boy's happiness, and the small acts of kindness he had seen ripple through their lives. "Yes," he said finally, "even one person can start something. You can't change everything at once, but you can start, and that start can touch many others." The boy smiled, holding the man's hand briefly in gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. At that moment, the man understood more clearly than ever before that life's lessons often came unexpectedly. The lesson he had learned was simple yet profound. Giving without expecting anything in return could teach more than any book or lecture ever could. Weeks turned into months. The boy continued to come to the park, the father's work improved steadily, and the man's small acts of kindness became routine parts of his day. He even started encouraging his coworkers to join him in helping others, sharing lunch or volunteering time. Slowly, a little community of thoughtful, caring people started forming around simple gestures that began with one lunch shared in a park. Looking back, the man realized he had changed more than the boy or the father. He was calmer, more compassionate, and happier than he had been in years. Life's stresses still existed, but he faced them with a sense of perspective and purpose he hadn't known before. The lesson he had received was priceless. Life was not just about working, earning, or accumulating things. It was about connecting, caring, and making even the smallest difference. The boy and his father would never know how much they had truly given him in return, the gift of perspective, gratitude, and joy. And yet that was exactly what life did. One small act of kindness could start a chain reaction that affected more lives than anyone could count. The man felt grateful, not just for the chance to help, but for the lessons he learned from people who had so little yet gave him so much. Sitting on that park bench, watching the boy run after pigeons and laughing freely, the man smiled. He knew this was only the beginning of many lessons life had to offer, all hidden in small, unexpected moments, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive, connected and ready to face whatever came next. The following weeks brought a rhythm to the man's life that he had never experienced before. Each day he walked to the park with his lunch bag, always carrying a little extra, always ready to share. It had become more than just an act of giving, it was a part of him. It was a way to connect, to witness stories, and to feel the quiet satisfaction that only comes when you make someone's day a little better. One bright afternoon, he noticed the boy sitting under the same tree, scribbling in his notebook. The boy looked up and waved. The man hurried over and handed him a sandwich wrapped in paper. The boy's eyes sparkled as he took it. "Thanks," he said. "I was hungry and I didn't have time to come here early today." The man smiled. "No problem. How's the homework going?" The boy shrugged. "Some of it is hard, but I'm getting better. My dad says I have to keep learning if I want to help people one day." The man chuckled softly. "Your dad is right. Learning helps us make better choices, and sometimes it helps us help others too." As the boy ate, the man noticed the father walking toward them. He had a small toolbox in his hand and looked a bit tired but satisfied. The new job at the workshop was steady, and though it wasn't easy, he was finally managing to provide for his family. He smiled at the man and nodded. "Good to see you again," the father said. "Things are slowly getting better. I can even take some time to help the boy with school now." The man felt a wave of happiness. He realized how much difference a little support could make. It wasn't about solving everything instantly. It was about helping someone take the first steps toward stability, toward hope. They sat together in silence for a while, the boy finishing his sandwich, the father leaning back against the tree, and the man feeling the quiet beauty of the moment. He noticed how the smallest gestures, sharing a meal, offering attention, listening, had brought them all together. Each smile, each word, each shared meal was like a thread weaving their lives into a stronger pattern. One day, as the man was preparing his lunch, he thought about how much he had changed since the first encounter with the boy. He remembered the boy's hungry eyes, the father's worried expression, and the quiet lessons they had given him. He realized that giving lunch had become more than an act of kindness. It was a path to understanding life, human struggle, and the true meaning of connection. At work, he noticed himself becoming more attentive and compassionate. A coworker seemed upset one morning, and instead of ignoring it, he stopped to ask if she was okay. She smiled faintly and shared a small problem she had been facing. The man listened, offering gentle words of encouragement. It felt good, not because he was being noticed, but because he could truly help. It was a small shift, but he noticed the impact it had on those around him. Back at the park, the boy had started to teach him little things too. Sometimes he would ask a question about something he was curious about, and the man would answer as best as he could. Other times the boy would share stories about his dreams, small and big, and the man would listen, fascinated. It was a mutual exchange, one that showed how learning and kindness could flow both ways. The father often joined them as well, sharing glimpses of his life, the challenges of the workshop, and his hopes for his family. He didn't ask for help, but he accepted it gratefully when offered. The man saw the strength and resilience in him, the way he balanced hard work with hope and love for his son. It reminded him that help was not just about giving, it was also about respect, understanding, and walking alongside someone as they worked through life. One day, the boy asked, "Do you think people are really kind, even when they don't show it?" The man thought for a moment. "I think they can be. Sometimes people are struggling themselves, so they forget to show it. But small actions like sharing, listening, or smiling can remind them of the kindness inside them." The boy nodded slowly, as if understanding something important. "I want to be like that," he said. "I want to help people even when it's hard." "You will," the man said softly. "You already are. You helped me too," it was true. He realized that the boy had taught him as much as he had taught the boy. Life had a way of giving lessons in the most unexpected ways, through the people we meet and the choices we make. The act of sharing lunch had started a chain of lessons, gratitude, and change that went far beyond the simple gesture itself. As weeks went on, more people in the park noticed his acts of kindness. Some children began to approach him, some elderly people smiled when he offered extra food, and even strangers on the street started recognizing him as someone who cared. But he didn't do it for recognition. The joy he felt in those moments was reward enough. Each smile, each small sign of gratitude reminded him that the world could be a better place. One small action at a time, one quiet evening. As the sun set and painted the park in golden light, the man reflected on the journey he had been through. The first day, seeing the hungry boy had seemed ordinary. Yet it had led to something extraordinary, not just for the boy and his father, but for himself as well. He had learned patience, empathy, humility, and the importance of being present. He had learned that even small gestures could ripple outward in ways he could never imagine. He also saw the growth in the boy. He was more confident, more attentive to school, and full of ideas about helping others. The father's work situation had stabilized, and he seemed more hopeful and relaxed. It was proof that even small actions could start a wave of change, one that affected not just one person but many. That evening, the man packed his lunch bag with care. He added a little extra, as always, and smiled to himself. He knew tomorrow might bring someone else in need. He knew that life would continue to present opportunities to give, to care, and to connect. And he was ready, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Walking through the park, he saw the boy running toward him, laughing, and the father following close behind. Their lives had intertwined in ways he hadn't expected. Yet he felt a deep sense of purpose and belonging. It was more than giving lunch. It was about creating moments of connection, learning from each other, and understanding what it truly meant to be human. As the day faded into night, the man knew one thing clearly. Life's lessons didn't always come in classrooms or books. Sometimes they came in the form of a hungry boy, a small lunch, and a quiet afternoon in the park. And when you paid attention, when you acted with compassion and care, the lessons could change you in ways you never imagined. Months had passed since that first day in the park. The man had settled into a rhythm that had become part of his life, almost like a quiet ritual. Each day he walked to the park with his lunch bag, carrying extra sandwiches, fruit, or snacks. It wasn't about duty. It was about a feeling he couldn't quite describe. It was a sense of purpose, of connection, of knowing that even small acts mattered. The boy had grown more confident and cheerful. School was becoming easier, and he often shared little achievements with the man, like a good grade or a story about a kind teacher. His father's work at the workshop had stabilized, and he had even started helping other people who were struggling, sharing his own experience and knowledge. The small family, once burdened by uncertainty and worry, now carried hope in their daily lives. One afternoon, the man arrived at the park to find the boy waiting for him, holding a small gift wrapped in paper. The boy handed it over shyly. "I made this for you," he said. "Just a little thank you." The man opened it to find a small handmade card with simple drawings and words. "Thank you for helping us. You are kind." His chest tightened and his eyes softened. "This means a lot to me," he said. "Thank you." The boy smiled, happy that his small gesture had made the man feel good. It was a reminder that kindness wasn't just given. It could be reflected back in ways you never expected. It was a lesson in gratitude, in the power of noticing and appreciating the efforts of others. They sat together, sharing a quiet moment before the boy got up to run and play with other children nearby. The father walked over to the man and shook his hand firmly. "You don't know how much you've changed our lives," he said. "It started with something small, but it gave us hope. And hope makes all the difference." The man nodded, feeling a deep warmth in his heart. He realized that the lessons he had learned were as important as the help he had given. The boy and his father had shown him resilience, patience, and the joy of appreciating small moments. They had reminded him that life wasn't only about rushing through days or chasing success. It was about connecting, caring, and making a difference where you could. As days turned into weeks, the park became a place of learning for the man, as much as it was for the boy. Every person he encountered, every smile he received, every story he heard taught him something new about humanity. He began to see the world through a lens of empathy, noticing the struggles and triumphs of people around him, small and large. He learned that everyone had a story, and sometimes a simple gesture could change the course of someone's day or even life. One day, while he sat on the bench watching the sun dip toward the horizon, a little girl approached him with a small sandwich in hand. She had watched him share food for weeks and wanted to try it herself. The man smiled and encouraged her. Together, they found a young boy who was sitting alone, and she offered him the sandwich. The man watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride and hope. The lesson was spreading quietly but powerfully. Acts of kindness could ripple outward, creating more kindness in return. That evening, the man reflected on everything that had happened since that first day. He thought about the boy, the father, and all the people he had met along the way. He realized that the life lesson he had gained was profound and simple. True happiness comes from giving, caring, and connecting with others. It wasn't about recognition, reward, or acknowledgement. It was about the quiet satisfaction that fills your heart when you help someone in need. He remembered the first time he had seen the boy, hungry and shy, sitting alone under the tree. He remembered the hesitation, the doubt, and then the decision to offer his lunch. That single act had sparked a chain of events that changed lives. It reminded him that even the smallest gestures could have enormous impact. The boy and his father had grown stronger, happier, and more hopeful, and in return the man had grown wiser, more compassionate, and more aware of life's true values. They had taught him patience, empathy, humility, and gratitude. It was a reciprocal exchange, a silent partnership of growth and understanding. Over time, the man began to share his experience with others. At work, he encouraged colleagues to notice people around them who might need a little help. He talked about the importance of kindness, of listening, of offering support without expecting anything in return. Slowly, he saw small changes. A smile shared, a gesture noticed, a helping hand given. It was proof that one person's actions could inspire many, quietly and effectively. One day, the boy approached him with a small notebook full of drawings and notes. "I want to show you something," he said excitedly. "I'm going to help people too, just like you." The man looked through the notebook and saw sketches of food, benches, parks, and small acts of kindness. The boy had been observing, learning, and now he wanted to continue the cycle. It was a touching reminder that the lessons we give can echo through generations, influencing hearts and actions in ways we may never fully see. The man smiled, realizing that this was the ultimate reward. The boy had learned, grown, and now had the desire to help others. It was proof that one small act, when done with sincerity and care, could create lasting change. It was not measured in wealth or fame, but in the quiet human connections that made life meaningful. Months turned into a year, and the man's life had subtly transformed. He carried his lunch with extra care, always ready to give. He looked at the world with new eyes, noticing opportunities to help, to encourage, to connect. He had become a living example of the lesson he had learned, that life's greatest rewards come not from taking, but from giving. And then one day the boy ran up to him, holding another gift, a small notebook, this time filled with notes about people he had helped. Small stories of kindness and sketches of smiles. "Look," he said proudly, "I've been trying to help others too, just like you taught me." The man felt tears well up in his eyes. He realized that the cycle had come full circle. The boy, once the recipient of kindness, had become a giver, spreading hope and joy to others. It was a moment of pure fulfillment, a confirmation that one act of care could grow into something extraordinary. The father approached, smiling warmly. "Thank you," he said again, but this time it was a shared gratitude. The man had given them hope, and they had given him life lessons that would remain forever. Sitting on that familiar bench, watching the boy share kindness with others and the father quietly supporting him, the man felt a deep sense of peace. He understood now, more clearly than ever, that the world was full of small opportunities to change lives. It didn't require money, fame, or grand gestures. All it took was attention, care, and a willingness to act. As the sun set and the park filled with warm light, the man packed up his remaining sandwiches, ready for the next day. He knew that life would always present new challenges, but he also knew that kindness, once planted, could grow beyond imagination. And in that moment he felt truly grateful, not just for what he had done, but for what he had learned. The lesson was simple yet powerful. By giving without expecting, by noticing without judgment, and by connecting without hesitation, one could touch lives in ways that echoed far beyond what the eye could see. From that day on, he continued his small acts of kindness, confident that each gesture had the potential to spark hope, inspire change, and teach lessons of humanity. And every time he saw the boy, now smiling confidently and full of compassion, he was reminded of the first day, the first lunch, and the incredible journey that a simple act of sharing had begun. Life, he realized, was full of lessons waiting to be discovered, and the greatest lessons were often hidden in the smallest moments of care and connection.